can hear me despite not seeing me, enjoy the 2-minute intro video for the black pill that follows a couple of white pills and share the link around. Live across platforms now.
So, what does your lawyer think your chances are tomorrow?
So I've read the written submissions myself. I like it. I put out a call there for some character reference letters from different family members and close friends. I've managed to get quite a few actually to submit to the judge. Again, I have not breached any of my conditions in the last 2 years. Right. I do not have any previous criminal records or anything like that.
Right.
You know, I feel pretty confident about the house arrest part, but then again, you know, watching Chris Carber's bail hearing get denied,
right,
that really struck a nerve there, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm nervous about it. I'm stressed out.
Of course you are. And you know, I've met you in person. I see you as a very reasonable individual. I see you as somebody who's logical and reasonable. You're not out there to hurt anybody, obviously.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. Our system is so completely fucked.
It is. It's been a rough time. I'm a single dad of 2 kids. I got a daughter that's 16, and I mean, anybody that knows about teenagers, it's a rough time. You know, my son is 10 years old. So it's been a ride here for the last couple of years.
Right.
You know, pretty stressful, you know, and I had to try and explain to them here what's going to happen tomorrow. And, you know, it's surreal. It's surreal. And the government thinks that, you know, laying more punishments to these people is going to solve the problem.
Just gonna, for those of you who don't know the context here, this is James Sowery. He's one of. We talk about the Coots 4 oftentimes, and ignore that there's like 13 defendants in the Coots from the Coots protests. James Sowery is one of them. I don't remember all of their names, and they've all gone through certain trials or are going through certain trials, or been locked up in remand for 2 years without a trial. James Sowery is one of the defendants in resulting from the Coots in Alberta, the protest. I'll back it all the way up just in case anybody has no idea what the hell's going on here. This results from the Ottawa protests or the convoy. This is Canadian news. That man's name is James Sowery. During the Ottawa protests, there were a bunch of arrests made in Ottawa when Justin Trudeau, the fascist pig that he is, came down with his militarized police and, beat the ever-loving piss out of veterans, protesters. This man is one of the men that was arrested in Coots, Alberta. There was a blockade on the border of, I want to say, Montana and Alberta. We know of the Coots 4, the 4 guys: Chris Carber, Chris Lysak, Tony, and there's a 4th one. I forget names, but I'm bad with names. Those are the big 4 that everybody knows about. They were arrested on conspiracy to commit homicide against an RCMP officer. They've been in remand for 715 days. No trial, no bail. Pedophiles get bail. Pedophiles get their charges dropped when they don't get a trial within the requisite period of time. I forget what the name of the rule. The Jordan rule. That Winnipeg dude who ran over 4 people at the protest, 4 protesters, he got bail. It was a big bail, but he got bail nonetheless. These 4 Coots guys, they've been in remand for 700 and some odd days. No trial, no bail. This guy, James Sowery, I'm going to have Jason Levine on tomorrow, who's an independent journalist in Canada who's been covering the trial from the beginning, to talk about it. I refreshed my memory. I was listening to that interview, Grizzly_Patriot on Rumble. That man was arrested because they set up a checkpoint, apparently, after he had delivered firewood to the protesters at Coots on the border and was driving back. And by all accounts, some people are going to say he tried to run over a cop with his 18-wheeler big rig. Bullshit. Okay, I mean, you could spout lies. Anybody who knows is relatively familiar with the evidence knows it's bullshit. The dude was going through a checkpoint And the police officer during trial admitted that he did something that could be construed as waved him through. And this guy who's driving his truck thought he was being waved through, drove through and accidentally clipped a pylon that was set up as the roadblock or on the side of the road, those orange cones, like a big cone, and knocked it over and was swiftly pursued by police and pulled over and was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and dangerous driving and was convicted. And he was just sentenced today to 10 months in prison. I play that clip because we're talking about a guy who's got a 16-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old kid, no criminal record, no priors, didn't breach any of his bail conditions while he was out for the last, 2 years, and is now, by all accounts, going to go to jail for 10 months. I mean, he's going to appeal the conviction. And in an ordinary world of remote justice, he would be allowed out, get bail while out pending appeal, because his appeal is going to take more than 10 months to hear. So by the time his appeal is heard, he'll have served his time. This is a load of bullshit of the highest order. So in as much as we had a couple of white pills last week, a federal court declaring Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act, unlawful. That's a good white pill. And it seems that, the old expression, nuhu rabadu. When you fight corruption, corruption fights back. What do the court system have to do now? They got to come up with some convictions and some nasty sentences real fast to justify the broader context of the invocation of the act. So that guy's going to go to jail for 10 months. He's been hauled off now. From what I understand, he already filed his appeal. So I guess there's paperwork. I'll get the details tomorrow, but I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. There's a fundraiser out there. I'll try to find the link for his fundraiser because, Chris Lysak, who's rotten away for the last 2 years with his 2 kids, on the outside, has to raise $400,000 for a defense. The Crown doesn't have to raise anything. They just dip into our back pockets, pull out some money. Hey, thanks for the salaries. We're going to pay ourselves while we persecute our own citizens. So I'm going to try to find that. The fundraiser to that. I'm going to give everybody the link to the tweet because the interview from Grizzly_Patriot is underneath it. And that's let's start off our Sunday show on a Monday with a black pill. Sorry. What a load of crap is 1000% right. KM357. It's an absolute injustice. These are political prisoners. We are witnessing a modern day lynch mob. This is what we're witnessing. Politically disfavored is the new racially disfavored of the old. I was going to start the show off by playing The View, those 5 idiot buffoons walking out to the song Money, 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 but I don't want to get copy claimed. These 5 idiots, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, and the other 3 jackasses on that show, literally taking a victory lap because a kangaroo court in New York ordered Donald Trump to pay $83.3 million to a batshit crazy lunatic. And they're coming up, taking the victory lap. And the crowd is cheering them on. Whoop-de-doo. We love the corruption when it's against someone we hate. The modern day lynch mob, people. Ironic is not the word. You know what? While we're on it, I'll bring. We're going to talk about it a little more when Barnes gets on. But I talk about it. It's worth remembering. It's worth remembering what these corrupt hack judges had the audacity to say publicly, despite knowing that they were on camera. Hey, they've got all the tools under their belt to make shit happen. Listen to Judge Engoron. He's the judge in Donald Trump's Letitia James fraud case. How do you game the system to convict an innocent man? It's very easy. They've got all the tools they want. How do you game the system to convict a racially disfavored person 50 years ago, in a prejudiced state? How do you do it? Well, the system does it for you. Just find someone who's willing to press the charges. They will convict. They will lynch a ham sandwich if it's of the wrong political orientation or of the wrong racial orientation. Listen to Judge Engoron talking about how he has the tools in his arsenal to carry out, basically the desires of his implicit biases. Listen to this.
I had one last thing to say about tools. I get a lot of what I do
puckering with his
motions,
mouth makes me want to vomit.
These summary judgment motions I mentioned. And all right, am I following the law or am I making law?
I shouldn't have talked over this. Listen to it uninterrupted, I promise you.
I had one last thing to say about tools. I get a lot of what I do involves motions. These summary judgment motions I mentioned. And all right, am I following the law or am I making law? Okay, I'm following law. I'm an impartial referee, but it's hard to factor out my own emotions. And I have tools. Somebody can say, well, Your Honor, you have to throw out this case because it's just like another case. Well, is it just like another case? What if the defendant was wearing a red sweater instead of a blue sweater? Well, that's an extreme example. That wouldn't distinguish most cases, but there are other facts that do. Maybe the education of somebody who supposedly entered into a contract would decide whether the contract was binding. I have a tool that I'll call a tool called estoppel. Somebody makes an argument and I say, you can't make that argument. You made a different argument 3 months ago in this case, or even in another case. So I wish you all luck. I'll stand here or around.
Do you understand what he just said? Like I'm having like internet fights with bots. I'm not having them because I assume that they're actual robots. Understand what he just said. I'll pause it now as I go through.
I had one last thing to say
One
about
last thing to say.
tools.
Tools.
I get a lot of what I do involves motions.
Well, you're a judge. That kind of makes sense.
These summary judgment motions I mentioned. And all right, am I following the law or am I making law?
That is never a question that a judge should be asking themselves. And he's not asking it in the reflective, like, yes, we have to struggle against our own biases in order to follow the law and not be activist judges who make the law. He goes the other way on this. Listen to this.
Okay, I'm following law. I'm an impartial referee.
In theory, but
it's hard to factor out my own emotions.
I should be impartial, but it's very hard for me to factor out my own emotions. Oh yeah, and I have tools to make sure that my wildest politically biased dreams can come true.
And I have tools. Somebody can say, well, Your Honor, you have to throw out this case because it's just like another case.
Do I? No, I don't. If I want to carry out my implicit bias, I don't have to throw it out because he's wearing a red sweater. Oh, is he making an argument? Well, I can prevent him from making that argument. You can't make that argument. You made a different argument 3 months ago in this trial or even in another file. I've got all the tools I want to gag, to punish, to get to the result that I want to get to, because am I making the law or am I following the law? Hey, you know who else does it? That's Judge Engeron in the New York Leticia James, New York nipple Judge Engeron. You know who else has it? Apparently that Judge Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll. We're going to talk about this in greater detail when Barnes gets here. Just gonna pull something up. I mean, maybe you guys don't know about this. Who knows? Last week, this is actually a week old, so this is even before the verdict. This is from NPR. You can go find it. The link, it's out there. I show my receipts just in case I make a mistake. This is from before the verdict. And so the last week is even more before the verdict. Last week, Kaplan, this is the Judge Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit. Not to be confused with the lawyer Kaplan for E. Jean Carroll, who happened to have been mentored by Judge Kaplan. And apparently now that is just being disclosed or being discovered for the first time. Helena Haba made a motion today. So Judge Kaplan, who mentored Attorney Kaplan for E. Jean Carroll, who's being financed by Reid Hoffman, change the legislation, extend statute of limitations, be the first one to file the claim. This is what Judge Carroll had to say. Last week, Kaplan said, quote, "The fact that Mr. Trump sexually abused, indeed raped, Ms. Carroll has been conclusively established. Mother effer. I know, end quote, thereby blocking Trump's lawyers from arguing this week that he did not rape Carroll. Ahead of the start of the trial, Kaplan underscored that this trial is limited to the issue of damages sustained as a result of his June 2019 statements. Those statements have already been determined to have been false, defamatory, and made with constitutional actual malice." You know what's really funny? You go to the actual verdict sheet, the verdict form. Did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump raped Ms. Carroll? No. Now, I know the argument here, by the way, and the argument as to how the judge got there is even more corrupt and more insidious than you can possibly imagine. The argument is that the judge said, well, by the dictionary definition, colloquially speaking, Trump can be said to have raped her definitively because sexual assault, sexual abuse can be deemed to be raped, colloquially speaking. You know what the problem is? This statement says it's been conclusively established, which means legally, not semantically, you goddamn corrupt SOB of a judge. This is not saying, colloquially we can say it because sexual abuse can be deemed to be rape under Merriam-Webster. No, he says conclusively established, which means by trial, by the jury. And it hasn't because it's a goddamn lie. Oh, no, but this judge now comes out and tells the jury, from what I understand, it's been conclusively established so that the media can now say Trump is a rapist. And so that Trump can now say, I never raped her because this judge says it's been conclusively established. It's absolute insanity, corruption of the highest order. I'm going to give myself an ulcer. Where's my blood pressure machine? I should ask my wife to bring this here. So that's that. It's Banana Republic show trial kangaroo courts. Not just in the States, not just in Canada. The West is falling in its entirety. And if you don't understand it, or if you like it because you think that these are your enemies and therefore it's warranted, the revolution devours itself. The commie collaborators, they weren't spared. They were just the last ones to be put up against the wall. Yeah, and I see people saying, he said, skip question 4 if no answered. How did they get to battery if they didn't answer the question about the unwanted touching? Okay, well, I got another interesting stuff. For those who don't know how this works, good evening. Viva Fry, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler. This is our Sunday night show with Viva Barnes Law. .locals.com. Barnes was in transit yesterday, so we're doing the Sunday show on a Monday. Yesterday, Mark Grobert, America's Untold Stories with Eric Hunley, was gracious enough to join me, and we had one heck of a show, notwithstanding. But this is... shit is collapsing, and you cannot tolerate it just because it's in your favor right now. You know, when the dice are rigged, it only works until such time as it's rigged against you. That's a terrible analogy. Oh, so for those who don't know, the way we start, I'm using Rumble Studio. They're working up some, they're tinkering with it to make it better all the time. We're live on Rumble. We're live on YouTube. We're live on that platform known as X. Let me see what we're up to here. I love this. We got a Twitter space and people are going to go see it there. But none of these platforms matter because what ends up happening is after a certain period of time, we end on YouTube and Twitter, and we go over to Rumble and Locals exclusively. So get your butts on over to, you know what, actually I should probably put the link up there. Hold on, share, copy, go to YouTube, and I'll put the link up in the top. And then after we're done on Rumble, we shut it all down. We go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Support is only for the after party. That's the way it's set up now in Rumble Studio. So link to Rumble. And on the menu tonight, a bunch of shit. What can I tell you? Now, hold on. We got something. We're gonna lighten up the mood a little bit with a little Nancy Pelosi hypocrisy, as if there's anything else out of Nancy Pelosi that we. Okay, pinned comment there. Let me see. I brought it up in the backdrop here. Yeah, listen to this. This is amazing. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. You couldn't script this stuff in a movie without people saying that's a cliche. That would never happen that way. So apparently, some protesters showed up at Nancy Pelosi's house. And they're like, I don't know, swarming her near her car, which I guess security learned nothing from the David DePop break-in and entry. Or at least now people seem to know Nancy Pelosi's house. So when the cops showed up, when DePop was there, nobody knew it was Nancy Pelosi's house. Security cameras weren't working. They pulled a little Epstein on the cameras. All right. We're looking at this now. Let's just watch this because it's hilarious.
Most of your constituents block beside you. Stop the genocide. Stop the Holocaust.
Democrats want the ceasefire. The Democrats want the ceasefire. The Democrats want the ceasefire.
Did you hear what you just said?
The Democrats want the ceasefire.
Go back to China, where your headquarters is. I don't know if the person who was protesting was Chinese, Asian, or whatever, but the people who call extreme MAGA Republicans racist conspiracy theorists spout off what ostensibly looks like a racial slur, coupled with a conspiracy theory that the people who are protesting Israel, or arguing for genocide, or arguing for a ceasefire, they're from China, they're communists, and they're funded by the Russians. I mean, this is. I put out a vlog today. You should go check it out. It talks about Canadian stuff. It is confession through projection. Oh, sorry, Barnes, I didn't want to bring you in just yet. Oh, come on, hold up. I blew it, people. It's confession through projection of the highest order. They accuse others of being racist conspiracy theorists. Go back to China, where your headquarters is. Anybody who's seen Donnie Darko, there's that scene where the guy says, "Go back to China, Ichbei," because he was an asshole. Robert, sir, sorry to bring you in like that. How goes the battle?
So this is a Rumble Studio. That is interesting. I'm getting used to this. How do you like it so far?
They need to incorporate many of the changes that I've made, sooner than later. Yesterday, the one that I've realized it might be prohibitive for multi-person streams is when I share the screen, like you just saw. Only one person can be in the video while you share a screen with a presentation. So that would make it impossible to have like panels watching streams at the same time. So they got to fix that ASAP. And some other things to take. It's good though. It's good in that, look at this. I can highlight comments from YouTube. Here's one from YouTube. I can highlight one from Rumble. There's Rumble. And even locals. I just have to see what the thing is. Here we go. Bada bing, bada boom. So they've incorporated all the comments, which is great. I can see the tips when they come in, but they're not highlighted enough. So I got to, make sure I don't miss them. Other than that, no, it's good. It's good. Robert, you had one hell of a week last week.
That's an understatement. So we got a lot of fun topics tonight. But the one that had the most questions on the locals board was about how was Philadelphia. You know what? It's definitely not always sunny in Philadelphia. No doubt about that. I ended up spending most of the week in the hospital, and the had an unidentified infection. They were worried about sepsis. Whether it was time to get that life insurance policy in quick before the certificate was written. But did ultimately survive. They got out Sunday afternoon and flew back to Vegas late Sunday evening. So ultimately survived it. So it was interesting. The Amish were asking me the night before at a big event of a lot of community members at Amos Miller's, given the assault that he's under that we'll discuss. What would happen if something happens to you? Well, I'm putting things into motion so that won't necessarily be the hindrance that it might otherwise be. I didn't anticipate having that risk come to bear so quickly, but okay, now survived. I always say I'm on God's clock. So when it's time to check out, there's not much you can do when you're on God's clock. But until then, you usually find a way to survive.
Did you miss any of the hearings as a result of being
I missed everything. I was out of it for most of that, for lots of drugs and lots of time in the hospital for antibiotics and what have you. So I saw nothing pretty much.
Jeez, Louis, and I won't ask too many medical questions.
There's some interesting experiences there. I'll leave it at that. But survived. So that's the good news.
Yeah, I tell you, the only good hospital is the one that you're not in. I mean, it's the hospitals, when you need emergency help, etc. But gosh darn, are they places to avoid at all costs?
Yeah, I personally wouldn't keep a lawyer too long in a hospital. There was some power issues going on there that the head doctor wanted to do certain things. I wasn't interested in those things. And it was an authority kind of personality, like very sharp. But once she realized that, you're one of those, dissidents, The next question she asked had all these medical students because it's a teaching hospital and what have you, which often are good because you get a lot of the younger interns and residents that are really conscientious, and the nurses were all great. The head doctor, I didn't always share perspectives with. I can see how a lot of ordinary people would get easily intimidated into all kinds of medical treatment that shouldn't necessarily happen under a true informed consent. They don't always take their informed consent considerations as seriously as they need to. But as soon as she realized that, okay, this is someone I'm not going to just be able to push around, and felt her authority challenged, a little bit like Cartman, my authority. She leaned over and almost whispered, "Did you take the COVID vaccine?" And I was like, "Nope." So now you know who I am. So let's rock and roll and move on accordingly. We can make sure I stay alive, but we're not doing any kind of drastic invasive thing. They must have asked 5 times. You want to take the COVID shot? You want to take the flu shot? You want to take this shot?
Oh my God.
And I was like, nope, 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 nope. I think there's pressure somehow from the Biden administration because it felt like some of the people were like checking off a box. But from the head doctor, it was more, oh, you're one of those people, kind of routine. So it is what it is. It was a learning experience. Survived, so that's good. Wasn't able to do a Friday hearing that I wanted to do for Amish Miller. So that got moved to February 29th, but that's going to be now we get to do it more whole scale and wholesale, which is better. But yeah, interesting experience in Philly. The irony there is, my grandfather, my father's dad, was in Philly. He was a great architect. They mistreated him there in the hospitals. It was actually something very similar to what they were trying to do with me, and he ended up being dead within a year. My father was orphaned by his, father's death at the age of 1.5 years. So it was like particularly apt. And I was like, well, you're going to try to redo what happened to Grandpa? I don't think so. We Barneses do learn our lessons. That book is The Door Rebellion, referenced last week. Turns out even more of my relatives were behind that. I got a great-great-grandfather they accused of treason, another great-grandfather they accused of other activities, all because he said that the Constitution should live up to its principles in the state of Rhode Island. That's the tradition of the Barnes tradition. It's not deference to established authority or letting little things like risk of death get in your way.
Well, the good news is you're out and back home. It doesn't get better than that. So, Robert, what do we have on the menu for tonight?
Yeah, we got a bunch. We got Amish cases. We got the Reuben King sentencing, one of the big white pills of the year. Amish Miller, that's both a black pill and a white pill. What they're trying to do to him is a black pill. What we can do together to maybe this may become the most significant food freedom case in America, and we'll be discussing that. The Fifth Circuit proved once again how the court should rename themselves the Court of Cowards, and ran away on the CHD versus FDA case. Wouldn't even say who wrote the opinion. That's how wussy they were. The International Criminal Court, or the International Court of Justice, rather than the International Criminal Court. I forget because they're neighbors there at The Hague. Had their ruling concerning Israel. And a parallel case in the United States brought on behalf of the Palestinians against the Biden administration, demanding a judge stop all support of Israel immediately. The border battle, that was the number one question on our locals board tonight. Biden is picking war with Iran, war with Russia, war with China, maybe war with Texas, apparently is his new idea. War in Yemen, apparently they're putting troops on the ground. The joke of what's happening with the New York verdict on behalf of Mrs. Loon there that you debriefed on the Alex Jones show. The duty to protect. How much does that apply to jails or prisons? And what's happening now that our people now are inmates suing over mistreatment over the trans policies, namely being subjected to sexual assault by trans defendants. George Carlin's estate is suing those AI makers. Election integrity its weak links are being exposed in a range of exposés for potential legal action. An Oklahoma death penalty case we discussed. Supreme Court may in fact did take it, which is good news. When can you be sued for what happens at a protest, BLM style? A tattoo artist, a few ancillary topics. Tattoo artist cleared of copyright infringement. concerning a case we discussed before, the Miles Davis photo put on a tattoo. So a lot of fun, interesting in cases tonight, and whatever else anybody pops up with.
All right, and we've got Life of Brian, $5 says, supporters of this know their servility is bottomless. There's no distinction between thinking and obeying for them. They will never even object. Pastor Moyer says, Nancy Pelosi hypocrisy. You beat me to the punch of saying, don't be redundant, Viva. But I guess it's obvious. So we'll do one topic here and then move on over. Do we do the biggest topic, the Texas border? Or do we save that?
Yeah. I think we save that as exclusive to Rumble. At least in the live version. We start off with the more politically hot one discussed around the world, the International Court of Justice involving Israel. Tomorrow, I'll be live with the Duran at 1 p.m. Eastern time, discussing all the crazy lawfare happening in the States and the various foreign policy ramifications and implications. I was receiving texts today from some United States senators, so we'll discuss that maybe a little bit. But maybe the International Court of Justice.
ICJ. All right. So you saw Grobert was on last night. So he has an interesting take and an interesting perspective. And he's a very smart man. And, you can disagree with him and you can hate him for it. Can't say it's ill-founded. Robert, so I'm reading through the decision, and I'll reiterate what I said last night. The definition of genocide under the Convention on Genocide, or Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, to me, it seems so overly broad, it almost no longer means genocide, but we'll get to that in a second. The first question in this was, South Africa filed this claim against Israel, and it's one of those cases where I'm not much of a fan of saying standing. The first question the court had to deal with, and set aside their political biases and whatever, was standing. What standing does South Africa have to take this claim against Israel? Now, I don't know who the signatory states are or countries to this convention. I presume that insofar as Palestine is not recognized as a state, it's not a signatory. And therefore, if the argument is going to be nobody but Palestine can file this complaint, nobody will be able to file the complaint. So standing as a first question, how does South Africa even have standing to file this complaint against Israel?
But it's pretty broad under the International Court of Justice. So the International Court of Justice is the successor to the entity created in 1920 as part of the League of Nations. This one was created after World War II as part of the United Nations, and its jurisdiction is limited by the United Nations itself. Now, it has no enforcement powers, which is important to understand. Judges are elected for 9-year terms. 15 different judges sit and they make decisions collectively in an aggregate. They get to live in The Hague or live in near The Hague and in the Netherlands where they are located. They are specifically there. Any state is allowed to bring a claim against any other state that before them. However, if a state doesn't like it, they can simply refuse to consent. And that limits any binding impact of the court. The court can also issue advisory opinions under certain circumstances. But essentially, it depends on the states as to whether or not the court has jurisdiction. So the only limitation is that you have to be a state that's a member of the United Nations. That's it. You don't have any other. So, for example, Gaza couldn't bring a claim. The Palestinian Authority couldn't bring a claim. Hamas could not bring a claim. That's why it would have to be a member state. But South Africa as a member state has the legal standing to bring any claim it wants against any other member state, not against an individual or anyone else. And but then the question, as the dissenting judge from Uganda mentioned, is that there's a specific limitation the court is supposed to recognize to not get involved in any quote unquote political question, that it has to be something that's justiciable. And the dissenting judge noted this really smacked of a political case, not a treaty case as it was being presented. But most of the court disagreed and said that it was a justiciable case for them to decide, that it wasn't a political question, that it was solely to deal with compliance with the Genocide Convention to which Israel is a party. In fact, the word genocide itself originated from a Jewish lawyer in Poland in 1942, describing what was taking place as a crime against humanity towards in the Holocaust. So I think, yes, South Africa has standing. However, whether or not this is really a political question, I think the arguments made by the Ugandan judge were more persuasive than the arguments made by the majority.
I mean, I can understand how it's politically motivated, but it seems like there's a pretty clear question of fact or question of law as to whether or not, by the definition of genocide, do you know when that definition of genocide was included in? Is that the original definition of genocide?
So the original definition, again crafted by that 1942 and by the Jewish lawyer, and it was ultimately implemented in 1948 due to the Holocaust in the Genocide Convention. And it's reflected in U.S. law because the Genocide Convention requires that each member state that is a signatory to the convention have domestic criminal law enforcement of it. And the domestic criminal law is 18 USC 1091, and it's the same definition. And what it requires is you have a specific intent to destroy a group, and that group is unique or a substantial part of that group, which can be a geographically defined aspect. And that's why as we look into this, there might be some genocidal intentions in the dispute, but let's talk about where and who it's doing it.
Well, that was the point I made yesterday. Is, if they're talking about carrying out acts of genocide on a group or in part, which includes acts of physical harm against any of its members, psychological harm, which I couldn't understand that this is the definition of genocide, but
that's where it's two different things. The real definition of genocide is a specific intent to get rid of a specific group based on race or religion, nationality, or ethnicity. It's limited to those categories. So and now how you implement it is very broad. And so you saw some conflation of implementation of genocide with definition of genocide. That's not really the case. What is okay, I want to get rid of all the Serbs, for example. Or let's say, I'll give a good example, Ukraine. I want to get rid of all the Russians in eastern Ukraine, as many as I can, right? Now, how I implement that, I might implement that just by making language inaccessible. You know what I mean? So but making language inaccessible is not genocide. It's the specific intent to get rid of the group entirely from living in a certain region or living at all. That is, in fact, genocide. So genocide is the denial of the right to exist. Its mechanisms of enforcement can be extraordinarily broad. But people are calling something an act of genocide and forgetting that it only is an act of genocide if it is a mechanism to enforce a specific intent to mass murder or mass remove, ethnically cleanse an entire population from a specific region.
All right. And so the ICJ comes down with this interim injunction, basically enjoining Israel to do that, which I said yesterday, Israel's going to say, we're doing that already. We're trying to prevent genocide. We're trying to prevent civilian casualties, even if people don't believe it. That's what their argument is going to be. Again, no enforcement mechanism from this International Court of Justice. So even if on the merits, they say Israel has committed genocide, there's no enforcement. There's no punitive, penalties or whatever.
Correct. And it was all that happens is, and not only that, there was a famous case, the United States versus Nicaragua, or vice versa, depending on how you put in the caption. In fact, the U.S. judge who wrote this opinion was the advocate for the U.S. in that case. A longtime State Department person who tends to be the kind of people who are on these courts. It should raise people's eyebrows that want to claim that Israel is part of the deep state, that being pro-Israel is part of it, that a deep state judge is leading this anti-Israeli effort. Maybe it isn't quite, look at which side George Soros is on. Hint, it's not the Israeli side. So for those that believe in that, this case kind of belies that assumption. But all they can do is they can withdraw at any time. They can withdraw their consent afterwards. And ultimately, it's entirely up to the Security Council of the United Nations. And even then, those provisions are not self-enforcing. So, like for example, each of the Security Council members is supposed to have somebody on the judicial bench, but right now there's no Russian. They excluded Russians after the Ukraine conflict. So, its current constituted organization is not reliable either. But Russia, for example, withdrew in the allegations against them concerning Ukraine. They had no confidence. They're like, we're not getting involved in this charade. What's interesting is some of my friends on the anti-war left side of the aisle were cheerleading this decision as if this court is a beacon of legal integrity and independence. It's like, this is the same court every single one of you was making fun of last year when they made false accusations against Russia. It's like, have you forgot? These are political hacks that are from sort of deep state aligned apparatus. For the most part, there's a few exceptions. The Ugandan judge, very independent judge, quite clearly. The Ugandan government was not happy with that judge's ruling, saying, look, this is an obvious political question. This is not something that, the leading African jurist said South Africa was wrong. Said you've shown no evidence here of specific intent to mass murder. What they did is they cut and pasted quotes out of context. Statements that are about getting rid of Hamas entirely were reinterpreted to getting rid of Palestinians entirely.
Yeah, but I've heard some of the statements. They're not statements I would make where they're talking about
I didn't
politicians.
criticism of it, but to say that constitutes evidence that the Israeli government intends to mass murder all Palestinians in Gaza. That's how they try to interpret it.
And to play devil's advocate, or just to steal man, or to displace,
or to ethnically cleanse it, so there's none left. And it's that there just was inadequate evidence of that specific intent. It's the same problem with the lawsuit filed in Oakland in federal court against the Biden administration on behalf of Palestinians, brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights. What a name of an organization that doesn't seem to spend much time focusing on Americans' constitutional rights, and was completely AWOL, by the way, during everything related to both lockdown and COVID. A lot of these progressive lefty organizations got exposed for the frauds that they are during that time period. But I find it absurd to go back to your original question, to Israel as being involved in genocide towards Palestinians for the Arab Muslim population there. If that was the case, why is the Arab Muslim population in the last century has constantly and consistently exceeded in actual population growth and size the Israeli population? It's got to be the weirdest form of Holocaust ever.
Well, but to steel man it, what they're going to say now that the definition of genocide includes displacement, they're saying, well, it's not to kill them, but to displace them out of the not the occupied territory.
Oh, you mean denial of the right of existence? I found that interesting. I was like, okay, so denial of the right of an existence of a specific group to stay within a certain geography, from the river to the sea. I mean, it's. I heard that.
Well, but that's where I say the hypocrisy is outlandish, because I mean, if South Africa is going to file a claim against Israel, why doesn't Israel file a claim? I guess they can't file a claim against Hamas. But if you're going to talk about acts of genocide being carried out for the purposes of annihilating a people or permanently displacing them, it's in their freaking charter. So you got one entity, the government of Palestine, trying to genocide Israel. I mean, so you got two parties that are trying to genocide each other. So maybe if you're going to lose that genocide battle, don't start it. Would be one person.
Well, in fact, there's only been one genocidal side in the history of the Israeli-Gaza dispute, or Israeli-Palestinian dispute, and it's the Palestinians. I mean, right now they're chaining from the river to the sea. So if removal of a group from or denial of a right of existence of a group to within a particular specified geography now constitutes genocide, which I think is a stretch, but that's how they're interpreting it. The group that's guilty of it are the Palestinians for more than a century. I mean, that the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, and their political predecessors and ancestors. And so that was the irony. It's like there's only one. It's very much confession through projection. It's the Palestinians who want, like, I tuned into Democracy Now! Because I thought, well, Democracy Now! Said they had a headline about explain the legal fallout or consequences for this. And there was no analysis of the actual legal analysis or consequences. Their headline lied. And there was just a couple of lawyers preaching about how much they hate Israel. But it's like the only group that's actually has denies the right to exist. I mean, take, for example, those people that love to say they're against the Zionist cause. Well, you know what the definition of Zionism is? A right of a specific group to exist within a specific a geographic region. So if you're anti-Zionist, you're a genocide supporter.
No, but
according to their definition, just plain the, if that's going to be the new definition of genocide, then Jackson Hinkle is guilty of it, which you might want to research the criminal law, by the way. The criminal law actually makes it a crime to simply incite this. It would be a perilous precedent for us to start to go down this path to go there. Now, there's obvious Fifth Amendment limitations but the criminal statute is so bland, so generic. You know who passed the criminal statute? Helped put it in passage? A certain President Joe Biden. So when he was senator in 1988. So legally, there's no fallout. Because until the UN Security Council does anything it says and does is inconsequential. Number one. Number two, all he issued was provisional relief. It didn't give the ceasefire demand that South Africa requested anyway. Third, Israel can withdraw anytime they want. So they can withdraw their consent from anything and it just becomes an advisory opinion. It's mostly, this is entirely in the court of public opinion case. But it should educate Israel and educate others in the United States on the political left that getting in bed with wokeism gets you in bed with a bunch of commies, and the commies have always sided with the Hamas side ever since Israel chose the U.S. over the Soviet Union in the 1950s. I mean, ever since that day, now Israel rewarded us by deciding to steal the secrets to nuclear weapons to better protect themselves. But putting that point aside, this is now the academy, the legal academy reflected in the international. I think it shocked Israel that that this court is that hostile to them.
I think they would have expected this, much like they expect every.
No, because they petitioned the court to dismiss. They didn't need to affirm it. See, like Putin understood the score of things, right? Putin's like, I know what this is. Shove off. We're not doing nothing. I don't consent to nothing. Goodbye. And discredited it right out of the gate. Israel went and petitioned them affirmatively.
That is the term. Do we use a torn to the jurisdiction in that context?
I mean, they can withdraw consent later, but it looks bad for them. Mm-hmm. And I think they really thought that they would come in and say, no, this is either a political question, we don't have jurisdiction, or no, these allegations are ridiculous. And it shows you both how Israel's politically disconnected from how it's perceived. And this was, we talked about it from the get-go. Going into Gaza will get you this political reaction around the world, especially the Arab Muslim world, but elsewhere, that will undermine any support you got after October 7th. But it shows their continued disconnection on that. But in particular, that they didn't realize the legal academy at the international Western level is entirely corrupted and co-opted by these anti-Western ideas and ideologies. And so that they easily embraced some dubious allegations from South Africa, in this case, against Israel. Because now, I mean, that the judge who wrote this opinion, who helped the U.S. ignore the consequences of U.S. versus Nicaragua, she knew what she was doing when she was taking quiz quote out of context and that quote out of context and that quote out of context. Very deliberate. And people should ask, okay, what's ideologically motivating her to do that? Because that's why Israel thought, oh, surely this longtime George W. Bush State Department appointee couldn't do this. Well, the federal judge to transition to the Gaza case is a George W. Bush appointee, and he's mostly been a lefty his entire time on the bench. He was the one who set aside the Defense of Marriage Act as it being irrational for people to think, for Congress to think they have any right to make any decision about issues relating to marriage. It's like, how is that irrational? You can disagree with it, but that's who that judge is. And that judge presided over a hearing evidentiary hearing when there doesn't appear to be any evidence that he has any legal authority to pursue the case to begin with. So it should remind these people, the George W. Bushes of the world, we'll be getting to that with the immigration battle. A lot of these old school establishment institutional Republican judges are just as co-opted by the culture wars as anybody else. And Israel and a lot of lefty Jewish supporters got into bed with crazy woke loons, and now they're seeing it backfire on campuses, backfire in certain parts of the political world, and now it just backfired at the International Court of Justice. And it's obvious they don't understand what's happened. They unleashed. They're like the losers of the French Revolution, during the ones that got their heads cut off by the revolution, right? You didn't realize maybe you don't unleash something like this. Maybe you shouldn't get in bed with these ideas, but they did, and now it's all backfiring on them in mass scale.
I was just going to add each member of the court receives an annual salary consisting of a base salary, which is $191,000 and post adjustment with special supplementary allowance of $25,000 for the president. That's not bad.
Yeah. But for those asking the legal consequences, there are none of the International Court of Justice.
Yeah, so, and it's an interim order that just makes a bunch of recommendations, which Israel's going to say we're doing in any event. They're going to have the hearing on the merits as to whether or not Israel has committed acts of genocide. I think we can all see the writing on the wall for that. And then there'll be no enforcement capabilities once that judgment comes down. Hopefully there'll be a not a ceasefire. There'll be a resolution to this dispute, to this war, which
politically probably a smart move on South Africa's side. I mean, the real money for all the anti-Jew conspiracy theorists out there, the real money is in the Arab world. So if you're South Africa, that you're much better off aligning with the Arab Muslim world than you are aligning with Israel. Same is true for most of the world. So monetarily, they're going to align in the anti-Israeli side, and you're seeing that reflected in what's happening at the UN.
All right. Now, with that said, we're going to head on over to Rumble and Local. So this is going to end it on YouTube and X. The link is pinned. I'll share it one more time. If anybody come straight over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. It'll be the easier way to do it. Hold on. I'll go to YouTube. There's the link to Locals. And the link to Rumble is already pinned up there. So what I do now is I just hit a button. It ends it on YouTube. Rumble and Locals, here we come now.